every single year. Hello guys, welcome back to the channel. I know it's been a little bit, but the Leafs once again lost in the first round of the playoffs, and I haven't been able to make a video about it because I have no setup at the house that I'm staying at right now because we're doing renovations, and I had to wait until I could come back to my student house to record this video. So I know it's a little bit late, but it has given me time to view the series back. I've watched every single game at least 3 times, so I kind of have an idea of how the Leafs did, how they performed, and should Leafs fans be positive or not? Because I think the overwhelming majority of Leafs fans, at least from online, have been significantly more positive after this first round loss compared to Boston, Columbus, and Montreal. And I think that's a good thing. I think optimism is great, but I think that when you let the objectivity of watching the series and you're like, well, they played good, yeah, but they still fell short, and I think we have to recognize this. Now, I want to be clear. I did pick Tampa to win. I thought they were the more talented team, but I also, after watching these games, felt Toronto was better in 5 out of the 7 games. And it is infuriating that the team that is better, when is the Toronto Maple Leafs, do not have the killer instinct to get things done and get through the first round of the series. I thought Tampa were vulnerable in this series. I'm going to be completely honest. They were making way more turnovers than I thought they would. Vasilevsky was the second best goalie for 6 out of the 7 games. And the Leafs should have won this series. And I think that a lot of the optimism is good going into the offseason, especially since it is such a critical offseason, as every offseason is with the Leafs. But it's also ignoring the fact that a couple key moments cost the Leafs the series. And I'm not going to go into a deep analysis. I don't have the capabilities, I think, really to show the film that I've watched in terms of understanding the series. But I do want to be clear, there are a few players, and I'll be getting into this later about where I think certain players should go in the offseason, and if they should be traded or moved on or whatever. But for the sense of the series, I think that Leafs fans can be positive in the sense that the Leafs didn't completely collapse, in the sense that they played well in every game. The Leafs played well in every game, at least they hung in there. Even the games that they got blown out, there were flashes at the end where you could see that they were coming back. They didn't just give up like in Montreal or like in Columbus. And that's a positive going forward. And I do believe in Dubas. As much as I give this team stick, I do believe in Dubas. I do believe in this core. And this season cemented that for me in terms of how well the core played in this series. But in terms of some of the depth pieces, I have really lost a lot of faith in some guys. So let's just get into what I'm going to do today, and that's where I think certain guys should go. I think if I was the GM of the Toronto Maple Leafs, this is what I'd do, because I think that this series has been analyzed to death. I don't think there's much really to go on except that the Leafs fell short and they were the better team in the majority of the series. So to start off, you have your untouchables right here. And the real key here is Austin Matthews, Mitch Marner, John Tavares, and Morgan Rielly are your untouchables. Now, you'll notice William Nylander isn't there. I am not suggesting you trade William Nylander, let me be clear. But I think that the biggest thing this offseason is that you have to really focus on these 4 players and why they are so valuable. I thought Morgan Rielly was maybe the best player in this series for the Leafs. I know he had a couple defensive lapses, but he scored some big goals, and he was vital in them even getting to 7 games. And for as much stick as maybe the Leafs defense gets or have gotten for the last couple of years, I think Morgan Rielly has continued to improve actually since 2018-19. He is a way more complete defenseman, and I think we saw that this year. John Tavares, I know a lot of people are big John Tavares haters. I am the biggest John Tavares fan on the planet. I will never say a bad thing about John Tavares because I think for people to really understand the value of John Tavares, you have to really go with the eye test. You can't look at the box scores. You can't look at his production because he's not going to be someone who scores 100 points in a season. He's never been that guy. He is what I like to call effective hockey players, and that goes in with at the extreme high end of someone like a Sidney Crosby to like your Patrice Bergerons to your players like that, where they're not going to stuff the score sheet. Obviously, Crosby has done that and does that, but that's not what their primary focus is. It's that they're good. They are good all-around players, and they are extremely effective, and they create opportunities for other players extremely well. And we saw that with John Tavares in this series. I think he got a lot of stick for the start, and that's just because he's not scoring goals. I think if you actually watch him play, I think that he's working hard. Tampa did really well making him carry the puck into the zone, and he didn't have the support to really work and have someone else carry the puck in while he can work down low and he can work in those spots where he's most effective. And then in terms of Matthews and Marner, I don't think you trade them at all. I think they're two of the best players in the NHL. I think Austin is the second best player in the NHL when he's on his game. And I think Marner is making a case for being cemented into that top 10 pretty easily. And yeah, I don't think there's anything you do with those guys. So those are my untouchables going forward. I think that this core, these four players, are really your core. I don't really consider William Nylander there. I consider him like a luxury piece, and we'll get into that. But I do think his value is still extremely high as in the try not to move category. So these are the players where I think that the Leafs should not move them if they can. They should try to keep on to them as if it's possible. And I have William Nylander at the top of that list. I think William Nylander is an extremely good hockey player when he's motivated and when he's put in a situation to succeed. I think this is the clearest issue with William Nylander is I don't know what his role on this team should be because he's spotty when he plays with John. And it might be that John's moving to the wing, so we would need a second line center. Actually, I'd like to see John play on Matthews as wing. I think that would be really cool. But I think when it comes to William Nylander, he's not a centerman. He doesn't work hard enough to be a centerman, and that's not a problem. I think that he's a goal-scoring winger who has really good production. He had more points than Tavares this season, but he is extremely flashy. He has a lot of defensive lapses, and he's really a streaky player. And he showed that in this playoffs. He was extremely effective on the back end, but he was extremely ineffective in the front end. And that's who William Nylander is. He is the most frustrating player on the Maple Leafs for a reason. I don't think you move him, though. Unless there's a crazy trade package where you can get better or you get significant pieces and are able to shed a significant amount of cap space, I would not move William Nylander. It would have to be like he's almost in that untouchable range. Like those guys who are untouchables, I'm rejecting 99.9% of trade offers that come for those players. William Nylander, I'm rejecting 90%. It would have to be something insane for me to accept a trade for William Nylander just because I think that you can't get someone better than him because when he's on, he is phenomenal. You just have to work into the system a way for him to be on more consistently, and then I think he's an extremely valuable player. Michael Bunting, super good value for what he is. He's like $750,000 next season. Don't even think about moving him. He's so good. TJ Brody, I think he was one of the better defensemen in the series. I know he has a couple defensive lapses, and those are going to happen, but I think he's a very good defenseman. I think he's good value on his contract. Pierre Engvall, pure workhorse. I think he can obviously improve his game. I think he needs to work on his finishing and his mental side of the game a little bit. But overall, his speed is tremendous. He is a great physical player, and I think for the value on his contract, you don't even touch him. David Camp, same thing. Dude just had a career year. You got him from out of the depths of hell in Chicago and turned him into an over 10 goals a season scorer. from 2 goals last season, I don't think you even touch him. And if he's able to snipe on Vasilevsky, you keep him. He had a tremendous playoffs. I think David Kampf was one of the best players in the playoffs. Ilya Lyubushkin, I know I'm pretty sure he's a UFA. I would try my best to keep him. I think he's been the best defensive partner for Riley we've had since 2018. I know Brody and Muzzin did very well with him as well, but I think that Bush brings that defensive aspect to Riley and allows Riley to really push forward and get into those offensive opportunities. And we saw that with this series, especially with the Tavares setup on the 4-on-4 and on the goal in Game 7 that Riley scored, as he is pushing up ice constantly, and I love that. Lyubushkin allows Riley to be free and be that offensive defenseman that he is, rather than having to make up for the defensive liabilities that maybe Muzzin or Brody have, because they also have a lot of offensive ability to their game, and they want to be in that way. Next, Rasmus Sandin. I'm really disappointed he didn't play in the playoffs, because I thought Rasmus Sandin is one of the most talented defensemen in the league. Obviously, injuries are a huge issue with him, but I think you just keep him. He's super valuable. He's going to be really cheap to re-sign because of his injuries and his lack of production a little bit over the last couple of years, but I think he's one of the more talented defensive prospects in the league. And defensemen have a longer development curve, so I think that I know Leafs fans are expecting like a very vertical development curve for these guys, but as you'll see with the next guy as well, it's very rocky developing defensemen, and I think that's not necessarily a bad thing. And same goes for Timothy Liljegren. I thought he had a very good season this year. Wish he played in the playoffs a little bit more, or I don't even remember if he played in the playoffs this year, but I think he deserved to. He was a very good player. Yeah, I think he's developing well. Jason Spezza is simply because I want him to be back, and I love him so much, and I think he is such an effective player. He has that sneaky offensive game to him. However, I don't think this is going to happen, and it's really disappointing. I'd love to see Jason Spezza back. I think every Leafs fan would love to see Jason Spezza back, but if he ends up in the front office or in the back staff, that wouldn't be too bad, but I'd like to see him win a ring with Toronto as a player. Mark Giordano, I think he was very good this season. I don't necessarily think he was as good defensively as a lot of other metrics or Leafs fans will say. Just from the eye test, I thought that his age was getting to him a little bit, and you could see that there was less speed in terms of getting to the back end. There was a couple times where he would get caught, and I think that his offensive ability was really lacking in this series. I think he had a lot of chances where it didn't generate in goals, and that's going to happen, but someone as vetted as Mark Giordano, you kind of expect a little bit more. So in terms of letting guys go, this is who I would consider. Now, this does not mean that these guys are gone. Let me be clear by this. There is a whole section for those guys where I think they should just completely be gone. But for these players, if you can keep them at good contracts and I guess you could keep them at good contracts, or they fit the system that you're trying to play, or if there's no good deal for them, keep them. Why not? Jack Campbell's the first one. This is all about money, basically, as much as Jack Campbell was really a great goalie this season. He's injury prone. He can't play a full regular season. He has tendencies to kind of disappear in games, and especially in the playoffs, we saw that with Montreal Game 7 last year. And, goaltending's weird. It's a weird position, and I think that giving yourself the most flexibility at that position is the most valuable thing you can have, unless you have a Vasilevsky or Fleury or someone like that, where it's like, all right, they're going to be good no matter what. Jake Muzzin, wasn't necessarily impressed with him this season. Obviously had some injury issues, but he makes a lot of money against the cap. He's aging. You have a lot of defensive reinforcement. You have Sandin and Liljegren coming up through the system. I love Jake Muzzin, but I don't necessarily know if he fits into the long-term plans of the Toronto Maple Leafs. Alex Kerfoot. Now, I would have had him in try not to move before the series. After this series, I'm sorry, but Alex Kerfoot, man, he made too many mistakes in this series. Like the high stick on Victor Hedman and the miss in overtime in Game 6 where he had a clear lane. Like, he played a good series. Like, he's a good energy guy. But at his price tag, you got to expect less of those opportunities to go. That dude basically cost us Game 6 on his own. And it's really frustrating because I thought I have been someone who's up and down on Alex Kerfoot, but I think you really need to consider trading him because he's not going. You already have your first, second, third line centers if you're keeping Tavares. So then you're paying him as a centerman, and he doesn't play center. And then he makes mistakes in crucial games when he's just trying to do too much. One thing about penalty killing is that your job is to sit back. Your job is to make sure they don't score. Your job isn't to be aggressive and leave yourself exposed and then get hurt on the counterattack. That was one big thing I talked about with the Leafs prior to the series. And I think Alex Kerfoot embodies that Leafs mentality of guys who try and do too much and then it bites them in the ass. So next is Ondrej Kase. Now, I know a lot of Leafs fans love Ondrej Kase. I didn't really see it too much this season. Like, he's a good player, don't get me wrong. He's a very good player. I thought he played well for the Leafs. But it's not like he's this outstanding piece that, like, depth piece that you have to keep. He's not David Kampf level in terms of you should keep him because David Kampf provides so much more value in terms of penalty killing and those surprise goals that you get. Ondrej Kase, I barely noticed him in the playoffs this year. The dude disappears, and I know that's what happens with a depth piece, and when you're not recognizing depth pieces, usually that's a good thing because they're not giving up goals. But a lot of Leafs fans I've seen over the season have really hyped this guy up as someone who we should keep or who should be a big part of the core. I just don't see it. Erik Källgren, he's fine. I don't know if he's a backup or an NHL player, but if you get a decent offer for him, why not? I think he could be a backup if you have like a real bell cow goalie. Like if you have a 50-game starter at least, then Källgren can be a backup. I don't think he's that much of a liability in the regular season, and then he doesn't play in the playoffs. So if backup goaltending is what's killing you, then that, so be it, right? Colin Blackwell, I thought he played extremely well in the playoffs. I am a big fan of Colin Blackwell. I would consider letting him go depending on price tag, but I think that I would like to keep him, but if the price tag is looking like it's going to be too high, so for a fourth liner, I think you kind of have to consider letting him go. If he's back, I'm super happy. Ilya Mikheyev, one of my favorite players on the Leafs. I just think the price tag is going to be too high for him. He's kind of proven that he's worth more than what the Leafs gave him. I think a team recognizes his speed and would probably want to put him up maybe even into a top 6 of a developing team. He's still young. He can still develop a little bit. So, it's price tag. And then Kyle Clifford. I know we just extended him, but it's Kyle Clifford. Like, if you get something for him, sure. I don't think he's a core piece. I don't think he's even a depth piece. You saw that after Game 1 when he gets suspended. He does stupid penalties like that, and then he doesn't play the rest of the playoffs. Like, that's not a guy you're banking your depth on. So, finally, we have the guys where I am saying you need to banish them to the Shadow Realm, put them on a spaceship to Mars, and get rid of them out of this organization as quickly as possible. Number 1 for me is Peter Mrazek. Now, this dude can't play. He can't. He can't stay healthy, and when he plays, he's crap. So why do we even keep him? He's making $3.8 million for another 2 years. I don't even care if you cut him. At least you're saving a ton of money there. But you got to get rid of this guy. He's not good enough to be a Toronto Maple Leafs goalie, and he's not a Toronto Maple Leafs goalie. Peter Mrazek is a chaos goalie. Chaos goalies will not work in the Toronto Maple Leafs market. It's just it's the unfortunate truth. Like, chaos goalies will have tremendous games and they will have terrible games. And with Peter Mrazek, it's probably going to average out to like a 9-10 save percentage as it has throughout his whole career. But there's games where he's like an 800, and then there's games where he's like a 960. And you can't have that in a market like Toronto. And I know these are like media narratives that come out, but fans watch these games and that you play for the most scrutinized team in the NHL, you can't have a goalie like that. And he makes too much money for what he's worth, especially with the cap crunch that we're in. So I think that as quickly as possible, if you can get anything for Peter Mrazek, take it and run. But if you have to cut him, I'd honestly cut him at this point. I think you can get better goaltending than Peter Mrazek on this team. Next is Justin Hall. Justin Hall should not be back next year. I know he played okay in the playoffs. Like, sure, I don't think he did, but people will say he played okay. He makes terrible turnovers. He's kind of a turnstile. He has no confidence. He can't handle playing in Toronto, and he's aging. He's not a young player. So why do we have the patience with someone like this over a Timothy Liljegren who is developing, who could develop, who's developed into a very good defensive defenseman and could develop offensive upside in the future? Justin Hall is simply just in the way of players like Timothy Liljegren's development, and he's crap. So why do we keep him? I don't know, man. Next is Wayne Simmonds. This one kind of hurts. Wayne Simmonds isn't good enough to be an NHL player. And I think that this is a similar take to what I had with Joe Thornton a couple of years ago. When some of my first videos were on Joe Thornton, how I was confused about his signing and how he was just too slow, man. Like, Joe Thornton was not good enough to be an NHL player for the Leafs. And I find that same thing with Wayne Simmonds. Wayne Simmonds he might have those moments with Pat Maroon and Corey Perry, which are awesome, which get fans going, but he's not fast enough to make an impact, and he doesn't score at all, and he doesn't have that same... He's just not the same player, and it sucks, but he's not good enough to be an NHL player. And then Michael Hutchinson, the fact that he's still on on the Toronto Maple Leafs is blasphemous. He should have been gone 2 years ago. Yeah, I don't think there's anything more to say on that one. So, in terms of like all of these players, whether it's these four who are the most important guys on this franchise to guys that I think should get rid of, I think the Leafs have a very big offseason coming ahead. And, yeah, it really sucks, though. Like, let's be honest. It sucks. Losing in the first round, it sucks, but you have to be positive. I'm extremely optimistic going into this offseason because I think the Leafs could clear a lot of cap space if they're aggressive. And it doesn't even have to be through the core guys, not even William Nylander. I think guys like Jake Muzzin, Jack Campbell, Peter Mrazek, Alex Kerfoot, Justin Hall, that clears a ton of cap space right there. And I think if you can continue to make deals like they did for Michael Bunting, you could be in a really good spot. Well, thank you guys so much for watching. Please subscribe. I'm going to try and get to 100 subscribers as soon as possible, so please subscribe. Like the video. It really helps. And let me know in the comments what you would do with this Toronto Maple Leafs team. Maybe when I get some more free time, I'll do a full film breakdown of the first round series, but I'll probably be getting into some more draft content as the playoffs go on. Drafts are always my favorite time of the year. I love looking at prospects and having that optimism, so I will probably be focusing on the NHL draft coming up soon, and then I'd like to venture out into some other sports. Like, I know the Jays are struggling right now and things like that, but thank you guys. Yeah, it just sucks, man. Leafs losing in the first round just sucks.